let's have a look at the latest opinion poll thanks to our mates at YouGov. And it does show a fall for support when it comes to One Nation. It is now in line with some polls, but there are others that say there has not been a drop in their support right now. The headline that'll be up right now at skynews.com.au says that Pauline Hanson's monoculture call is seeing One Nation support slide. Let's have a look now at the overall primary. What are we talking about, and what are we talking about when it comes to the changes? One Nation down 4 points to 26, still number 2 behind the Labor Party, who is also down 1 at 28. Biggest mover in the poll, the Coalition, with presumably much, if not all of it, coming from One Nation. The Greens down, other and independent. And we are also starting to break this thing down into, that Teal's party. They're currently running at 2%, so not bad for a party with just 2 members in it. But let's have a look now also when it comes to the different genders. Which way are they going right now? Well, men, again, drop for One Nation, down to 29, down -3. Labor, the Coalition and the Greens are all sitting solid. As for the ladies, and which way are they going in this opinion poll this week? Well, you can see Labor going backwards. Geez, I wonder if that podcast may have had anything to do with that, but we'll see. The Coalition apparently up 5. Pretty big change. One Nation, of course, down 5. Anything outside of 2 or 3 points is outside of the margin of error. That is clearly a big movement which is taking place. All right, so you can see there the Greens are down and the independents and others are up, including, as I say, about 2%, give or take, when it comes to the new Tiffany Teal party. All right, in terms of the class system, and again, we're not really classist in Australia, but we know the difference between those at the top of the tree and those that are the working class. And the working class, well, their view has slightly changed as well, apparently. One Nation. Remember how dominant they have been here? Well, as you can see, a very significant drop in just a couple of weeks since our last Sky News polls. You can see there too, the others, the Greens, Coalition, all of it down. So a lot of that's gone missing. It all ends up going into the giant don't know or undecided category, the government being able to go back up. But still, as you can see there, the best part of 5 points behind One Nation. In terms of the middle class, of course, the vast bulk of voters in Australia. Again, Coalition is the beneficiary of Labor and One Nation going backwards. So in many ways, while the automatic thought here is going to be about One Nation and a move back there, the point here is that it has not been going to Labor. It has been largely going back to the Coalition. As for the top of the tree, well, again, this is always amazing to me that the Coalition has now replaced Labor as the choice of those at the top end of town because of an 8-point swing. Incredible. What changed? Well, the Greens. Now, again, we're talking about fractions of fractions, but still, we always like to break this down for you. Now, a lot of people want to talk about One Nation and the beginning of the end, the crumbling of the this, the crumbling of that. Please, are you actually paying attention to what's going on? Because according to this poll, we asked the people who said that they were going to support One Nation. How hardcore are they about their support for One Nation? Well, half of the number, in fact, more of the number, 56% of that number say they're locked in, they're not changing. 32% say, look, they're with them, but they might change. 12%, they are not locked in yet to vote for One Nation, but that's the way they are leaning at the moment, and that's the way that they are talking about it to the polls.
Right, gather round, because Pauline Hanson just found out something that should make every single politician in Canberra break out in a cold sweat. And mainstream media is doing everything in their power to pretend it is not happening. Quick favour, if you are loving this breakdown, let me see you hit that subscribe button. Over 90% of viewers have not yet. Please do, it is free, takes a second, and means the world to us. Thanks if you did. Now, back to the show.
As for the Prime Minister and his performance, this is always worth marking because this has been, frankly, the government's problems. Remember, the lies that have become law when it comes to the budget. Well, how does it now go for the Prime Minister, who has had some pretty bad numbers? Well, his satisfaction level slightly up, his dissatisfaction level slightly down, but 56%. More than half of the country dissatisfied with the performance of the Prime Minister. All right, now in terms of the generations, Gen Z, of course, the youngest of the voters, they are largely satisfied with the Prime Minister as opposed to dissatisfied. Millennials, remember, the next group up when it comes to the areas, 53% are dissatisfied, 42% are satisfied. Now, again, the whole point of the budget was people under 50, over 50. Well, millennials make up a massive chunk of that under 50 number. So the Prime Minister is not out of the woods yet because of the drag that is existing right now with millennial voters. With Gen X, which gets you a little bit closer or above 50, this is my generation, 63% can't stand him. Well, I know my people, right? In terms of the boomers, their view when it comes to the Prime Minister, 59% are dissatisfied, 35% are satisfied, and the greatest generation of all those that were in and around World War II, well, unsurprisingly, they can't stand him at all. Now, interestingly, we also decided to ask inside all of this today about what people's feelings were about Australia now compared to, say, 12 months ago. Let's have a look at what that now feels like, because the very significant number of Australians, well, in fact, half believe that 12 months ago, compared to 12 months ago, Australia is now weaker and poorer. 34% say, meh, the same. Who are these 15% of people, apart from people who, I don't know, might be giving advice to government right now when it comes to housing, think that things have got better? Well, anyway, that's just 15%. Another question that we've got inside the poll is when it comes to anti-Semitism. The Anti-Semitism Royal Commission, which has been rolling for some time, well, unsurprisingly, the extreme majority of Australians see this as a problem. We see anti-Semitism for what it is, which is a scourge, which is a problem, and the polling is pretty clear here, right? 25% of the country says that it's a very serious problem. 41% of people say that it is somewhat serious. 18% believe that it is a minor problem, not a problem at all, 6%, fair dinkum. But as you can see, pretty easy there. Those that believe it's a problem, a somewhat serious or very serious problem, it all matters. Now, unsurprisingly, you may think there's a great difference between young voters and older voters. Well, I can show you that too. Those that are between 18 to 24, 53% of them say that it is a somewhat serious problem, all right? 67 are in the top two categories. Let's compare that with people who are over the age of 50. What's their position? Well, you can see, again, a little more balanced, but again, a clear number there where what we're talking about, 72% of people over the age of 50 who consider it to be a problem or a major problem.
So here is the headline nobody in the press gallery wants to say out loud. One nation could walk away from the next election with up to 15 senators. 15! That is more than the Greens. Let that sink in for a moment, because for years the commentariat treated Pauline Hanson like background noise, a minor annoyance you mute during the news. Turns out the joke is on them. Here is how the maths works, and stick with me because this is genuinely fascinating. Get to 14% of the vote in a state and you are guaranteed a Senate seat. Push past 20 and you are looking at 2. Cross 27% and 2 seats is basically locked in. With retirements shaking up the crossbench and Jackie Lambie's old network falling apart in Tasmania, One Nation is perfectly placed to hoover up seats across the country. They do not even need to win government. They just need to become the handbrake on whoever does.
Yeah, and just about that Royal Commission, again, it continues the focus of people inside academia, from those that work at universities to those that study at universities, and the horrific experiences that they have had with anti-Semitism.
He quite quickly changed his tone and said, well, we're an anti-Zionist organisation. And I said, that's fine. It's kind of not what we're talking about. And he asked if I was Jewish, and I, of course, said yes, because I didn't think that anybody would have an issue with it. And it escalated quite quickly, where another girl nearby started chanting, we won't stop until people like you are kicked off campus. And she made a big scene, and other people heard about it in the group and stopped handing out their flyers and began accosting me. Some people joined in the chant, which I felt was something that they had chanted before, just from the unison of it. They started asking if I liked killing Palestinians.
There was one person in particular who, again, I've come to know is not a student or staff member, a deacon, but still present on the campus. And he began assaulting me, just repeatedly shoving me over and over again, a very large man, until I was at the edge of the stage, and the one final push knocked me off of it. I fell to the ground and I sustained injuries to my hip and leg and my arm, and I was bleeding.
Now, as you know, the media, when it comes to all the opinion polls, including what I've just shown you, they all have one narrative and one narrative only.
Her rise in the polls was meteoric. Now, support for Pauline Hanson and One Nation appears to be slipping.
Well, support for Pauline Hanson has fallen for the first time in 4 months, according to fresh polling from our colleagues at the Sydney Morning Herald.
Support for One Nation has slumped in the latest Resolve strategic poll.
Now, I'm going to back up and kind of go where I was last night, which, yes, is there a change from number 1 to number 2? Is there the beginning of not always going up? Sure. Right, but you'd think that 20% of people have just changed their mind in the past couple of days. And there are opinion polls from Demos AU and the Roy Morgan poll, which still have One Nation sitting at the top of the tree. But remember, in all of these polls, it's still only a couple of points away from Labor. It's the coalition, not Labor, that has been the beneficiary of these changes. So, OK, as it was before, it is now, which is the rearranging of the centre-right of Australian politics. I want to remind you, across all of these polls, you can see, yes, a reduction in support for One Nation. News poll at 29%, Redbridge at 29%, the Morgan poll 28%, Sky News Pulse, the freshest and latest of them, 26%, and the Resolve poll, again, at 26%. But as I told you last night, while I always thought the conversations about, are they going to form government might be just a little bit too tippy-top. And at that number, is there still a chance they can finish in front of Libs and potentially become the opposition? Absolutely. Very much all still in play. But as I have pointed out through the entirety of the first rise and now plateau of One Nation, the big play and the way to change Australian politics is their performance in the Senate.
Now, before you think this is a One Nation victory lap, let us pump the brakes, because the polling itself is a roller coaster. One Nation has actually dropped 4 points down to 26% in the latest numbers. But here is the twist. They are still sitting comfortably ahead of the coalition. The Liberals and Nationals are the ones actually gaining ground, and they are eating into both Labor and One Nation's lunch at the same time. Meanwhile, Labor has slipped a point to 28%. Everyone is losing altitude except the coalition, who are quietly climbing the ladder while everybody else argues on the ground floor. And the demographic split is where it gets properly interesting. Among working-class voters, historically One Nation's bread and butter, support has fallen off a cliff. Among women, support is down 5 points, outside the margin of error, which tells you this is not just statistical noise. But get this, 56% of remaining One Nation voters say they are locked in, rusted on, not going anywhere. So even as the party bleeds support at the edges, the core is granite.
Now, largely, the media have just ignored One Nation as the whoever's at the bottom of the garden. They could do that when there was only one senator, then 2, now 4 senators, remember, after the last federal election. New South Wales produces a senator. Western Australia produces a senator. 2 senators from Queensland. At the next election, people like Lee Hanson would have to be considered the absolute favourite, considering that much of the existing Liberal senator in Tasmania are up stumps and leaving. Jackie Lambie was already just elected at the last one. Her number 2 has now left the Jackie Lambie network and run off to the Labor Party. So you'd imagine that there is quite the possibility of Lee Hanson. And that's just in Tasmania, let alone the state-based numbers in New South Wales, in South Australia, in Western Australia, in Queensland. They all point to a massive increase in the number of senators that One Nation will have. And if they are able to replace people that have been on the centre-left, like the second Lambie candidate, well, of course, that ends up giving them the position of getting very close to, if not having, the balance of power. So regardless of the result, whether it is the Prime Minister with no majority or with a thumping majority, there's a chance that if you send the One Nation senator to the Senate, the handbrake comes on and you're able to limit much of the damage that the government wants to do through the Parliament. I've said this the whole way through. And I'm pleased to say there are people that are starting to notice, like our mate Phil Curry. He, in fact, takes it even more mainstream. Today, in the pages of the Financial Review, a statewide result, because you see, he noticed what I said. as long as the number is above 15, that almost guarantees a senator in every state. The number right now, as I said, worst case scenario is the Resolve poll at 26. Best case scenario is at 29. So you're probably talking here about not just one, but maybe two senators. A statewide vote of 14% is required to win one Senate seat, while a minimum of 20% or 21% gives a party a good shot of picking up a second seat. A vote of 27% virtually guarantees two seats in each jurisdiction. So while they may not change the government, while they may not upend the upper house, the likelihood is if it's above 15%, they could absolutely flip the Senate. Ben Oaquist, hard leftist, part of the Australia Institute, but he provides the information here. They could end up with as many as 15 senators. That's 3 more than the Greens. They would effectively be able to pick up, 11 seats in one election? Incredible. The coalition would have 20, Labor would have 28. There would be just 2 independents, being David Pocock and Lambie, who, of course, holds over from the last election. So don't fall into this whole garbage, right, that I did think got a little too tippy-top, a little too hot, which was One Nation's going to win the next election. And if they don't win the next election by the polls, then it's all over. Well, the reality is if you currently have 2 members in the lower house, 4 members in the upper house, there's a chance that you could double or treble the number in the lower house and you could explode to more than the Greens, then that would be one hell of a win, all right? But this is part of the expectations game, part of the media trying to say that nothing other than total victory is an absolute loss. That's BS, and that's why I'll be talking to Barnaby Joyce in a moment or two's time.
Right, let us talk generations, because this is where Australia turns into a house divided. Gen Z apparently is the happiest with the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Gen X is sitting at 63% dissatisfaction, and boomers are even grumpier. It's like a family dinner where the teenagers think everything is fine and everyone over 40 is silently fuming into their mashed potato. And speaking of fuming, let us talk about the budget, because this is the part politicians really do not want you paying attention to. The government is out there spruiking a path back to surplus, but independent analysis from the Parliamentary Budget Office says otherwise flatly. Deficits are projected to keep rolling on for years yet, with this year's shortfall sitting north of $30 billion. The so-called path to surplus relies on things like unprecedented restraint in NDIS spending and a shrinking public service, neither of which anyone seriously believes is coming. Meanwhile, bracket creep, the quiet tax hike nobody voted for, is set to push the tax burden to record highs. It's a bit like promising to pay off your credit card by assuming you'll simply stop needing food, petrol, or electricity. Bold strategy.
Now, surprise, surprise, the BS in the budget was BS. It's been a couple of months since old mate stood up and was congratulated for the greatest budget of all time that apparently was about taking care of young people, but young people are still having a bit of trouble getting into a house right now. But don't worry about that. Of course, Jim Chalmers, well, he's turned around and said, look, people will sort of, if they're angry now, they'll get over it, even though they lied, which for some people is in and of itself a reason not to pay attention to anything when it comes to this government over the next couple of years. Oh, no, but they're all just fools who read the wrong things, watch the wrong things. And, of course, the media, as I've said for how long now, that the budget, as important as it is to watch it, to understand it, it is a political document virtually now more than an economic document, and they move all the dials they possibly can to get the best version of the story to get them through the night on the assumption that you won't remember it next week, next month or next year. Well, the Parliamentary Budget Office has stepped in and has again done what I did on budget night, which is called BS to the BS in the budget. The federal government's return to budget surplus, which by the way is years away apparently, relies on an unprecedented restraint in NDIS spending, meaning it won't happen, shrinking the public service, which won't happen, allowing bracket creep to push the tax burden onto workers to record highs, that will happen, according to the Parliamentary Budget Office, which warns it may be unrealistic. So again, the BS in the budget is BS. The independent budget watchdog on Tuesday warned that Treasurer Jim Chalmers' fiscal strategy was also vulnerable to the rapid rise in state debt, which could eventually drive up federal borrowing and increase pressure on the Commonwealth to boost further funding to the states, meaning less money for them and higher budget deficits. Deficit on top of deficit on top of deficit equals $1.4 trillion. The report projects that in the budget, which is allegedly going to be $31.5 billion deficit this year, is going to remain in the red for next year, 2033 to 2034. Was this the lead story from the political people at all tonight, or were they talking about opinion polls? Was the vast political diaspora that tells us who the good guys are and the bad guys are discussing this? Did you have to send out a search party to maybe find this to be read somewhere? Thankfully, some reported it. But is this a chance that this is the first time you're hearing about this? Oh, that's not by accident, by the way. That's the way that all of this is supposed to work. Be distracted by the horse race. Be distracted by the polls. Be distracted by the BS. Look over here. We passed the law, so all the people who get screwed over it still get screwed over by it. But remember, all of those people were tech bros. Please.
Now, zoom out, because the real story here is not really about polling numbers at all. Half the country believes Australia is weaker and poorer than it was a year ago. Only 15% think things have actually improved. And on top of the cost of living squeeze, 2/3 of Australians now say anti-Semitism is a serious problem, with concern even higher among older voters watching university campuses become flashpoints. So while the media obsesses over the horse race, who is up 2 points, who is down 3, the actual substance, the deficit blowouts, the demographic fractures, the fiscal sleight of hand, gets buried in the background. The real divide in this country is not left versus right anymore. It is between people paying attention and people who switched off years ago. Thank you for watching. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.